Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the line of Firestone Airide Red Label Extreme Duty Rear Helper Springs. Now this is going to be available for a bunch of different truck configurations. This is going to be for your 3/4 ton and larger, and you're going to want to use our fit guide to make sure you're getting the proper custom kit for your truck. This is what our airbags look like when they're installed, and it's really nice. They use a lot of brackets here that all bolt together, but there's no drilling required in all of this installation. So really it's not too terribly hard to do. The bags themselves are awesome construction. They're double convoluted. So if you've ever heard of Firestone, they've been around for a long time. And airbags is definitely something they've specialized in. And these are no different for your passenger truck or your 3/4 ton truck. They're going to be super heavy duty, and that's really where it comes into play on a truck like this. You're going to be either using a fifth wheel, bumper towing, or just have a payload. And this accounts for really salvaging the suspension from sagging too much. So we marked off where we had our truck from the factory. This collar was originally right here when it was stock and unloaded with weight. And that's fine for comfort. But the issue is when you start to put weight, that's really going to take away from the amount of stroke that the shock has. So the airbags fill that void where normally there's jounce bumpers, and those jounce bumpers are pretty short, so it takes a long time for those to really bottom out, and that really just translates to sag. And the airbag filling that void just makes sure that you're able to account for that and pull that sag back and actually get a better ride and stance of your truck overall. So here we have the truck unloaded, so no weight. This is just how it's driving down the road without anything on it. And I used some painter's tape to get a reference line. We have this collar here on our shock, and that way when we do put weight on here, we're gonna see how much it drops, but also once we get our airbags installed, we're gonna see a difference between our jounce bumper, because this takes a while for it to make contact with the strike plate. So this shock has to move quite a bit before that even makes contact, and that's where those airbags really come in handy, filling that void. So we're definitely going to keep an eye on here just to show the difference and also be able to get our vehicle back to its stock height once we have a load on there. No matter if you're towing with the fifth wheel, you're bumper towing, or you just have payload in your truck, either way, these airbags are really going to help with the sag. So we have some masonry bricks here. We're going to put in the bed. We're going to see how much this thing squats. Our 250 is definitely able to handle this load, but a lot of newer trucks are just a little bit more comfortable because people are using these as daily drivers. So until you really put some weight on it, that's when you're really going to notice the squat, and that's when you start to feel it in the steering wheel. Anytime you're going to turn, whether you're braking, your headlight heights are going to be a little bit off, and overall that suspension's just going to be really working because it's already compressed. Now you can see our jounce bumper is not even bottomed out yet, but our suspension's really absorbing the weight that's there. So that jounce bumper, if we were to hit some heavy bumps, it is going to probably bottom out, but you can see it's going to continue to sag until that's bottomed out. So if we had a heavier payload in our bed, the truck is going to squat even that much more. So we're going to hit a few bumps here in our parking lot, and already the truck does, the bottom's just kind of hefty. You can kind of feel it squatting already. And as we hit those bumps, it's actually not too bad. And this is a pretty heavy duty truck, so the payload that we're putting in isn't by any means, you know, a stretch for this. It's riding pretty well, but you can definitely feel it's a little bit lighter up front. And that's when you have those really heavy loads, that's when you're going to want all the steering feel you can get, all the braking you can get, just for a little bit more confident driving. So overall, this isn't too terribly bad. But a lot of times that I've seen when we put airbags in, the after effect, just you barely notice anything's back there, and it just makes the suspension a little bit more, a little tougher to be able to handle that weight. Not that this can't, but it's going to supplement your shocks. So that's the problem when you have a load like this. Your shocks are compressed, so you're losing some of that stroke each time. And as we saw before with our bump stops, there's even more that it can squat. At that point, that suspension's really getting worked at its limit the entire time as you're driving, and that's where the airbags will supplement that, allow it to soak it up, and give your shock that full stroke back. Now, while I'm not really feeling it too terribly much, when I make the turn is when it's super noticeable, and that's where you can kind of feel the truck just kind of lean with that weight there. And when you go to turn back the other way, that's where you really start to notice that sway back and forth. The truck just doesn't feel as planted. It kind of gives it a top-heavy kind of feel because that weight is really shifting side to side, and our suspension's working as hard as it can to minimize that. These bags in particular are going to be rated at 7,500 pounds capacity, so that doesn't necessarily give you more capacity as far as towing. It's what they're capable of handling, and on a truck like this is going to be able to handle quite a bit of weight. So really, no matter what trailer you throw at it, it's going to be tough to get over 7,500 pounds directly on it. So if you're towing a big old fifth wheel or a gooseneck, these are going to be a great option for you. Now on the flip side is during normal driving when you're not loaded up, you want to make sure it's a comfortable ride. And these, you're not going to notice it when you're just driving around with no weight on it. You just want to make sure you keep it at 5 PSI minimum. That way the bags aren't kind of squishing around. They have a little bit of body to them, and they're going to act like a jounce bumper. So normal driving with no weight at 5 PSI should be nice and cozy as it was from stock. This kit does come as a dual path configuration, which means that you have individual control of one side or the other by 2 different Schrader valves. And that kind of comes into play we saw on this truck because it's slightly squatted on the driver's side, and that's because the fuel tank's over there. And the load that you'll be towing might be the same way, so if you want to counteract that load a little bit, you can put a little bit more pressure in one side or the other. Now you can do a single path. You're going to want to pick up a push connect T-union to accomplish that. And that way when you put the pressure in, it'll equally divide it between the bags. This can also be used with a compressor system. We're going to be eventually installing one on here, and it'll play well with any compressor that you pick up. Now we had this out on our test course, loaded up with some weight in the back before we had the airbags, and it did squat quite a bit. So we're going to reload that up. I'm going to adjust the airbags back to a nice factory ride height, and we should see a difference. With our airbags installed, we'll get this weight put back up. And then I'm going to fill it up a little bit and see where it is. We're going to get that sag all fixed. So let's get this thing loaded down. Now with our weight in the bed, we can see where it was sagging originally with our reference tape. And I'm just going to fill this up to get it back to the factory ride height. And this is where, if you're considering getting an air compressor on board, it is really nice to be able to do that at the push of a button. Or the flip of a switch, whereas on a manual system like this, it's going to work the same, but you will have to fill it up manually. And we're just about back to factory ride height there, so I'll get our other side set up as well. So to get back to that factory ride height, we have a little over 60 PSI in there, and I could probably let out a little bit here, but these bags being heavy duty, you got a lot of versatility as far as pressure goes. You can go all the way up to 150 PSI. So we have both of these at about 60. We'll take it out and see how it does. We're gonna hit some bumps real quick just to see the difference. Oh, and immediately, just those small bumps there, it just feels like the suspension, how it should be from the factory, honestly. So that's the great part, is you can account for that weight. It's super comfortable right now. And just kind of poking through our parking lot here, immediately I can tell our steering is better. It gives it a heavier feel. It's not so loose. And that's because we're getting more contact. That airbag kind of raises the rear, so we get all that contact patch. And the side to side, yeah, it truly feels like there's nothing back there in the truck, and that's something that's really nice. It goes back to just kind of normal driving. If you wouldn't, if I didn't load that in myself with the forklift, I wouldn't really know that there's weight back there. The way that it's driving is exactly how it was stock, which is really nice. Whereas before, pretty loose, and just that side to side, you feel that weight. It's not the case here. This is really, really nice. And that was a look at the line of Firestone Airide Red Label Extreme Duty Rear Helper Springs.